How is everyone doing? Strength Chat episode 91, and today I have got a very special guest for you. Today I'm joined by one of the foremost experts in strength and conditioning, functional training and general fitness, as well as running his own facility. He's worked with the Boston University, Boston Bruins, as well as the US women's ice hockey team. Today I am joined by Mike Boyle. How are you doing?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. What's been happening in your world? What have you been up to recently?
Oh, there's always something. I just got done actually talking at Merrimack College, which is a local university, and I just spent 2 hours and 15 minutes talking to their strength and conditioning staff, and now I am driving to Central New York to watch my daughter play ice hockey. So,
oh, nice. Who's your daughter playing?
My daughter, they're playing Cornell University, so
okay.
She plays at a school called Robert Morris, which is in Pittsburgh. They're playing Cornell, and so I'm off to. I got a little 6-hour drive or 5-hour and something drive ahead of me, so I figured good time to hopefully record a couple podcasts.
Spot on. Are you expecting a good win?
No, I'm expecting a good game. So Cornell's the nationally ranked number 5 team. My daughter's team is the number 8 team.
Oh, wow, okay.
I think it'll be a good game.
Yeah. Two close teams like that. Hopefully it'll come out for a result that you want. So, obviously as a coach myself and, looking at the content and the books and the information that you've put out there, for anyone listening who might not know your background and, how you've got to run your own facility and, get to where you are, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself?
Yeah, so this is my 38th year coaching, which seems crazy, but I've been at it for a long time. And as you said, I've had a pretty broad range of experiences. So I've worked with the Boston Red Sox in Major League Baseball. I worked with the Boston Bruins in the National Hockey League. I spent 30 years kind of in the American university system at Boston University. I took a year and lived in California and worked with our women's Olympic soccer team. I've worked with our women's Olympic ice hockey team. So I've spent 37 of my last 38 years in Boston, but I've had a pretty broad range of experiences during that time. And obviously at that time, 22 years ago, I opened up my own business where we started out training just athletes, and then we gradually expanded it into a business where we really do about 50% kind of general public, general fitness type thing.
Yeah. Oh, cool. So with what was the reasoning behind adding in sort of the general population type of training?
Economics.
Yeah.
There's way more moms and dads than there are kids, to be honest. So it's when you really start thinking about it, and obviously the moms and dads are consistent year-round customers. So when you guys kind of do square meters, but we do square feet. Our biggest facility is 22,000 square feet, so we've got a lot of space.
Yeah.
And to be in a situation where you've got that much square footage and you're not using it, maximizing it, just didn't make sense to us. We initially just started doing some one-on-one stuff more for our coaches to be able to make some additional money.
Yeah.
And then kind of over time, we started to expand it and think, why aren't we doing, I always said CrossFit made, in spite of the bad things about CrossFit, it made adult small group training kind of sexy.
Yeah.
And I think I looked at that years ago and thought, gee, we need to capitalize on this big interest in adult group training. So we started to do groups in the morning, and that just kept expanding. So now, we're busy from 5 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Most days of the week.
Yeah, I'm quite glad you mentioned about that because I know sometimes, when I first started out in your head, it's just like, yeah, I'm going to train athletes all day, every day. But actually, in the grand scheme of things, they might only have a limited amount of time. And exactly like you say, parents and people that are working, they can come in and out. And from a business point of view, it can be a little bit better to, have a mixture.
Oh yeah, I think to me, I never tell anybody ever again to go the straight athlete route because there just isn't enough demand to keep a facility open year round.
Yeah.
If you do it in the athlete route, you've got to figure out 2 or 3 different niches of athletes so you can coordinate off seasons, and then you still have lots of dead time. It just doesn't make sense. So now for us, we still have our professional athletes, but I would say they represent, clearly less than 10% of our business are our kind of amateur athlete, high school age, middle school, college kids, probably now are 30 or 40% of our business, and then the adult is 50%. Most of our growth has been within that adult market, really.
Yeah. In terms of the, because obviously having read the books and the content you've put out there, like I started at the start of this I said at the start of this podcast, there isn't that much difference in terms of the training that potentially the general population do and the athletes do. There may be some differences, but the basics and the simple things are kept the same. Why have you found that to be so effective?
Well, I think, one, I say this all the time, but we all have the same bones and the same muscles, so I don't know how it can be that drastically different anyway, in terms of you've got somebody with the exact same skeletal structure, the exact same whatever attachment points, origins, insertions, however you want to look at it. So it's tough to figure out what would be that drastically different. Obviously, I think when you get into things like speed and power, that's different.
Yeah.
But I always say it's kind of the Pareto principle, the 80-20 idea. About 80% of it's going to be pretty similar and 20% of it's going to be different.
Yeah.
And that may be sport to sport or athlete to non-athlete or whatever it is, but we just haven't seen the general need to be that different. Yeah.
What have been sort of the foundation principles that you've used then? Because everyone thinks that starting out as a coach or when you're looking for a program, you kind of want to look for the most complex thing and the most interesting thing. What are the foundation principles that you use when you're working with athletes and as well as with the general population?
Well, I think it's interesting. So you get into that's the whole functional training discussion, right?
Yeah.
The training has to make sense. So I think people need to be on their feet. They need to be doing multi-joint exercises. They need to be pushing things. They need to be pulling things. They need to be doing things for their legs. They need to be doing, core training is the cool term now, but they need to be sort of doing things for their midsection. And again, I'd look at that and think that doesn't matter to me if you said, housewife, doctor, or professional athlete. I'm still going to tell you that they need to be doing all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Everyone, it's that saying that every human is an athlete and every athlete is a human. You've still got to be able to work on those key areas. In terms of obviously, what are the slight differences that you use? Would you add in a little bit more power when you're working with the athletes, or can the general population work with have power elements in their programs as well?
The general population, it's really the difference of how we're going to implement the power program. So with our adults, for us, and this was one of my biggest sort of disagreements with CrossFit, our adults do not Olympic lift. I don't think adults in general make good Olympic lifters.
Yeah.
So we're not going to try to clean or snatch or push jerk or things like that with our adults. We're going to tend to jump and throw medicine balls for power more than we would Olympic lift, whereas with our athlete population, we will teach pretty much almost every athlete that we deal with. We'll start by teaching them to Olympic lift. Yeah. So in the power area, it becomes not. I always like the Simon Sinek start with why idea.
Yeah.
We know the why. We know everybody needs power, and we know actually that adults are in like they really need. They might need it more than athletes because they're losing it faster than athletes are because they're not doing it. So it's significantly important, but then it becomes what you get into after you get to the why is the what and the how. And I think then we've got to look and say, okay, what are we going to do? And we've got to choose the right what, and then we've got to look at how are we going to do it? How are we going to implement that? So power for us with our adults probably gets as complicated as, box jump or kettlebell swing might be the most complicated thing that we do. But, we're going to do medicine ball throws, medicine ball chest tests, rotational medicine ball slams. So we're going to be thinking in the same way I always think. We want upper body power, we want lower body power, we want rotational power. And that would, again, be the same with an athlete or a general population person. But how we might choose to pursue that would be different.
Yeah. Yeah, looking at that, obviously, you've mentioned there about the different movement patterns, and for the power that I use, it might be exactly like you've mentioned, a box jump and a swing, and that might be the starting point. In terms of actually progressing from those basic movements, if you like, I know the power movements, and it's still a little bit complex, but how far can you keep using sort of kettlebell swings and box jumps and the throws? Does that have a limited shelf life? Do you have to cycle them quite a lot, or how have you found that when you've been working with people?
We definitely cycle them. Something like a kettlebell swing stays pretty constant, actually.
Yeah.
And I think we do a lot of swings and they stay constant. We'll progress our plyos from box jumps to low hurdles to different types of progression that way to things where we're working on elasticity a little bit more, so we're trying to bounce between hurdles. It'll take us actually, with our adults, it might take a long time, 12 weeks or 9 weeks to get to real plyometric training where we're trying to have them rapidly respond to the ground.
Yeah.
So there's a progression that we follow there, but that's really the same progression we follow for our athletes, and it's similar in terms of medicine ball throwing. We may start, a lot of times our progression, what we would look at there is what we might call developmental sequencing. So we might start in tall kneeling, for instance, with throwing, and then work our way up to standing, and then work our way up to stepping, and then work our way up to, say, kind of two-step progressions to throwing, those types of things. So we're trying with our adults to change something about what we're doing every 4 weeks.
Right, okay.
There's an old Charles Poliquin concept that he used to talk about. He used to call it variation without change.
Yeah.
And I like that idea because what we don't want to be doing is the same thing over and over again. We also don't want to be too quick to change and too diverse. So we'll try to keep things in progressions where we might say, for instance, medicine ball chest pass, we might say, okay, we're going to do tall kneel chest passes for a month. And then we might go from tall kneel to standing.
Yeah.
And do that for a month. Yeah. And then we might do, we might say, okay, now we're going to do stepping chest passes for a month.
Yeah.
Where we're going to have somebody kind of step and follow through. And then we might do some sprint start chest passing, like coming from a 3-point start, almost like a American football lineman kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the idea is we're varying chest pass, but we're never stopping chest pass. And that's kind of how our progression sequence works all the time.
Yeah, it's a little bit like, I like to think of it as, adding in the layers each time and just adding in something extra. Because I know I've had it before with clients, and there's some variations just to add to make them still adhere to the program, and adding a little bit of variations, because I don't know what your thoughts are, but sometimes staples of a program, which might be you might have the goblet squat in there for quite a long time. You might stick with the trap bar for quite a long time and still get people relatively strong. Would you agree, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, we try to not stick with it. We try to not do anything the same way for more than a month.
Okay.
Only because what we find with our adults is they get bored.
Okay.
And if we have people who we think are going to be, around for 52 weeks a year, we want them to not be bored. But we may do that. It's funny, like you said, it might be goblet squat is a good example. We might do goblet squat, and then we might do eccentric emphasis goblet squat, and then we might do a density phase of goblet squats where it's, we give them goblet squats and push-ups and see how many sets they can get in 10 minutes. So we are always trying to think of ways that it's the same but different.
Yeah.
So what we don't want is for someone to be like, damn, I've done the same exercise every time I've come here for 12 weeks.
Yeah.
We never want anybody to have that feeling. But the reality is, after a while, they're going to kind of get that feeling because it's going to be like, okay, how many ways can I dumbbell bench press? How many ways can I do a split squat? How many ways can I do some sort of pull down motion? And eventually they start to realize that, yeah, we're going to cycle through this stuff. It might be alternating, starting bilateral, going to alternating arms, going to unilateral. But it's hard when you're thinking, push, pull, knee dominant, hip dominant, core, to think, how interesting can I make it? I think that's some of the challenge in the adult market that you don't have in the athlete market.
Yeah. Just touching on that there in terms of, obviously you mentioned you might change the variables of the goblet squat, like you mentioned there, focusing on eccentric or density or anything like that. Is there times where on that, for the actual process of improving their performance or improving their results or fitness, that sometimes that you'll expect results to go up or results just to maintain? How have you found that when you've been cycling it? Or would you expect an increase in or expect results month on month?
I think we're expecting results month by month in general, just because, the harsh reality, particularly in the adult market, is that most people are just too weak.
Yeah.
So they're going to get stronger. And I think sometimes we're going to find that we need to, I think with our female clients, we have to push them to sometimes lift a little more weight. With our male clients, we sometimes have to push them to lift a little less weight better.
Yeah.
So I think that's sometimes when we get into that, it's the art of coaching idea.
Yeah.
Okay, I need to be able to, the person who's running that group needs to know, what do I need this person to be able to do? But I think the other thing we're finding with our adults, a lot of times people just want to come in and get a workout.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I think sometimes we can be very focused as coaches, on how strong somebody's getting, or are they losing body fat or whatever it is, when a lot of the people are just, I want to get to the gym 3 times a week and work out.
Yeah.
And if they do that, they get a sense of accomplishment from that. Like, hey, I got there 3 times and I worked out.
Yeah.
I feel good about myself. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think, as I was joking, so I'm going to turn 60 next week. And I said, I look really, really good for 60. But I looked about like this when I was 30, and I didn't look so good. But the fact that every decade I haven't gotten any worse, by the time I get to 60, it makes me really good.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's how you have to see your adult market and realize that, if I can get somebody through adulthood without a really significant physical deterioration, I've really accomplished something.
Yeah, I completely agree. Sometimes the success, I think success is relative to the person, and sometimes just getting in the gym, that's a win in itself. That the fact that and it's that phrase, isn't it? Consistency beats anything else. If you're still coming in, especially for the general population, if you're coming in 3 times a week, and training and getting a little bit stronger, and keep working, then that is a win in itself.
Yep, and they'll find, what we find too is the adults find their wins in strange places. I had a guy the other day, I actually have to get him to, he hasn't recorded it for us yet, but he grabbed me the other day and was like, just couldn't stop thanking me because he had gone on a hiking trip. He said, I guess summer I go on the annual hiking trip. He said, and the training has really helped me with my hiking. He said, but interestingly enough, he said on this trip, a woman fell and sprained her ankle really, really badly. And he said, I carried her on my back, piggyback style, 2 miles down the mountain.
Wow.
He said, he goes, I could never have done that if I hadn't been here working out, if I hadn't been doing, squats and carries and all the, pushing the sleds and all the things that we do. get you to say that to a camera.
Yeah.
Sometimes you realize that those are where the real wins are going to come from people when they do some task that they anticipate will be either difficult or impossible.
Yeah.
And then they realize that it was maybe sometimes neither.
Yeah, absolutely. That I love stories like that. There was a woman that came into the gym, and I think she was closer to 70, and she said we've got a tire in the corner of the gym, and she was like, "Oh, I'll never be able to flip that." And anyway, when she flipped it, it was awesome. I've never seen someone so excited about flipping a tire before. So yeah, I think little wins like that are awesome. Touching back on the athlete side of things, obviously you've mentioned about you might add in the for power, the Olympic lifts and different throws and all that sort of stuff. Especially working with athletes, you still want them strong, so you might cycle the squats and the deadlifts like we've mentioned. But with power and speed, how have you found keeping to the basics with that, or is there a little bit more to it when it comes to getting people faster and more powerful?
Well, faster, there's a lot more to it, because I think speed with the adult market is a little bit of a shaky area to go to, because particularly in the adult male market, you start getting into the Achilles tendon rupture age bracket. And so you have to start questioning whether sprinting is a really good idea. Okay, do I want this person to be practicing maximal sprinting?
Okay.
We do not. We run, but we don't sprint. So our adults are not going to say be doing time sprints.
Yeah.
With our athletes, particularly the last couple of years, we've really changed our speed development philosophy to the point where we're timing sprints twice a week, every week. We'll time some version of a 10-yard dash.
Okay.
And we'll do generally 3 or 4 reps twice a week. And with a very, I always think, and this was maybe one of my biggest career mistakes, we used to view sprinting as a test.
Yeah.
And we'd say, okay, twice a year we're going to test you and see if all the things we do in the weight room make you faster. What we've realized now is that the best thing that you can probably do to get faster is to run fast.
Okay.
So we're now viewing sprinting as a tool, a real, well, I always said it's the highest form of velocity-based training, because it's the highest velocity. Your velocity, an average sprinter will go over 8 meters a second.
Okay.
And the fastest thing you're going to do in the weight room is about 2, in terms of meters per second.
Yeah.
So you start realizing that, wow, wait a second, if we just run sprints, we're getting 4 times more benefit. And it's one of the reasons I think that we always think that sprinters, whether they're weightlifters or non-weightlifters, they always look like weightlifters.
Right. Yeah.
You'll find some sprinters and people say, oh, that guy doesn't lift weights. Like, I always go to the Bolt idea. If you go and Google Usain Bolt weight training, anybody who watches it always thinks, oh my God, his program's not very good.
Yeah.
And it's not. He'll be picking up and doing leg press and leg extension, stuff that we haven't done in 20 years.
Yeah.
And then somebody thinks, oh man, if I had him, if I got him on the right program, he'd be really fast. And I'm kind of like, how much really faster could he possibly be? He's the fastest man in the world.
Yeah.
And the one thing you realize is that the common denominator is sprinting, not weight training.
Yeah.
And I think we've had it backwards for a really long time. So from an athlete perspective, we're sprinting, and sprinting has to be timed.
Yeah.
Because if it's not timed, you don't know that it's sprinting.
Yeah.
Because again, when you start thinking, and I started doing the math out for this for an article that I'm writing, but when you start thinking about this, you need to be, depending on who you talk to, either above 90 or above 95%. So when we start looking at that and saying, okay, what does that actually mean? I'll give you numbers. A reasonable 10-yard dash time is 1.5 seconds.
Okay.
Which means that 90% is 1.65. So you've got to be under 1.65 for it to even be considered speed work.
Yeah.
And you've got to be like 1.57 if you're thinking 95%.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty thin margin in terms of how fast somebody is moving to really elicit the kind of responses that we're looking for.
Yeah.
And I just don't think you can do that without timing.
Yeah.
There's a guy named, people are interested, Tony Holler, Holler,
yeah.
is a guy that's been really influential with me in terms of speed development the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where the things that he said as a track coach have really made me think a great deal about what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Yeah. Definitely. I think speed is one of those topics where, I was chatting about this with one of the coaches that I work with, and one of the biggest things, whether in sport or, within sport, if you're quicker, if you can have that change of speed, that's going to have a lot more impact on a game than, just being really, really strong. I'm not saying that you don't need that strength, but, speed can, probably have a little bit more impact on a game. Just there when you mentioned about the
important quantity in every team sport.
Yeah. Sorry, you just cut off a little bit there. What did you say there, Mike? Sorry.
Oh, I said speed is the most important quantity in any team sport. There's no question.
Yeah, absolutely.
And much more so than strength. And I'm not anti-strength by any stretch of the imagination. I've always kind of viewed myself as more of a strength coach, right? But the reality of the situation is that speed is what really, really matters.
Yeah.
And so for us, we want to be in a situation where we're trying as hard as we can to enhance every person's speed. And we just realized that for the longest time, we weren't really doing that. We used to, I would say, we have a program in the weight room that's very vertical.
Yeah.
Very up and down. And then we wonder why we're not seeing that vertical situation translate into the horizontal. And we're like, it's not translating to horizontal because we're not getting into the horizontal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's so kind of simplistically clear, and yet somehow we manage to kind of miss out on that. You think, how do we miss something that's so incredibly obvious?
Yeah. I think sometimes it's because the strength training side of things, it's the foundation to build on for power or speed or whatever the next stage is for the clients that people are working with. But I think sometimes it's a lot easier to see if people are getting stronger because they're going to be lifting a little bit more. I think sometimes with potentially power and speed, it's a little bit harder to judge. But obviously, you mentioned in there about the timings, like you can see how they're getting faster from there. But moving on from the time sprints, is there anything else that you would add in with them? Because obviously, running mechanics might play a part. Ankle stiffness, so the ankles aren't rolling. Is there anything, any other layers that you would add in to make it a little bit more complex as time goes on with developing speed?
I mean, not really. I think in one sense, yes, in terms of obviously our plyometric exercises are probably going to be more intensive than they would be for our adult client. We're going to Olympic lift, which I think is a big kind of separating factor from a power development neurological standpoint. But in reality, no. I mean, it's the biggest difference is running sprints. I mean, if you look and say, what's the biggest difference? What are we doing more differently than anything else we've done? Because I think sometimes, like you said, ankle stiffness, running mechanics, I look at a lot of that stuff and think, I'm not so sure that's all not just window dressing.
Okay.
And that what really matters, I think there's a lot of people who are doing lots of the wrong stuff, but they're just not running fast.
Okay.
And they're not getting results. Because you can get people that look pretty at drills and can do all kinds of different speed drills, and they look great, and they don't move fast.
Yeah.
What we're seeing is that we're doing less speed drills and more sprinting, and we're seeing really significant changes in speed.
Yeah. So would that be dependent on on the athletes that you're working with, or dependent on the sport, or the level of the athletes? What do you think the reason is behind that?
No, there's no like we've done it. It's really funny. One of our Major League Baseball pitchers, who actually this year we're playing for the Dodgers in Los Angeles, 37 years old. Last year, he had the fourth fastest time from home plate to first on the team.
Okay.
And that shouldn't happen. Their running requirement is very, very low.
Yeah.
But because of the amount of speed work that we do, and it ended up being like pitchers in baseball. You guys obviously baseball is probably not as big a deal across the ocean, but
No.
in the National League, the pitchers have to hit.
Yeah.
And so they end up doing a lot of bunting because they're not good hitters.
Yeah.
And so the ability to run fast makes a difference. And so that's how it ended up with this guy. They realized he was one of the fastest guys on the team that they recorded, and I think he was the oldest on the team. But and like I said, 37, but the fourth or fifth fastest on the team at that age. So no, we're doing it with everybody. I don't care whether it's American football, soccer, ice hockey. Our fastest recorded time is an ice hockey player.
Okay.
Who plays for the Buffalo Sabres. This guy Jack Eichel, who's captain of the Sabres, but he's run the fastest athlete 10-yard dash time that we've recorded.
Okay.
And no, so we feel like speed kills, and it kills everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Just on a bit of a tangent there, for ice hockey, I'm a little bit, I don't know whether, because obviously ice hockey, I haven't followed ice hockey, but how does sprinting sort of relate to ice hockey? Because obviously they're not running on, their feet aren't touching the floor. Obviously they've got a blade underneath. Just on a tangent, how does that work in terms of speed and the carryover into ice hockey?
Interesting, actually, really high correlation, and they've done a bunch of research studies. The kinematics are pretty similar,
yeah,
and because it's still the ability, obviously, in ice hockey, you have a yielding surface. You're effectively cutting ice with the blade, so you've got a longer force production time, but the speed correlates very, very strongly in terms of the fastest sprinters will be the fastest skaters.
Yeah.
In general, there will be some exceptions because there is a skill to skating in and of itself. But in general, we'll find that the guys who skate the fastest will also run 10-yard dashes the fastest, because it's like that sort of that ability to push against the ground or that ability to push against the ice is similar enough where it doesn't change very much.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Having not followed a lot of ice hockey, I was a little bit surprised by that one. Obviously, sometimes we touched on it at the start when we got into programming that sometimes people can look for the most complex program. Do you think sometimes that from a client's point of view or an athlete's point of view, looking at programs, that they always think that the most complex program is the best, but not really knowing the reasoning behind anything of it? And do you think if coaches make it a little bit too complex, they're just trying to show off or don't really have an idea of what they're doing?
Yes, I would say I absolutely agree. Coaches, coaches get into the minutia because it's interesting to them, and then I think they waste a lot of time. I think they waste a lot of the athlete's time and a lot of the client's time. We try to not be overly complex. I always tell, people ask me about periodization. I'm like, periodization is the biggest waste of time in strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
You got to vary things up. I get it. You don't want to do the same thing week after week. I get it. But the basic kind of DeLorme-Watkins progressive resistance idea still works pretty darn well. If you get a little bit more weight on the bar every week, you're going to get stronger.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the harsh reality. And there are people who love to make it way more of a kind of, science class than it needs to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes you can start putting things in there and, before you've actually set everything up or actually figured out what you're doing, you could have just actually been doing a lot simpler exercises that are going to give you a lot more benefit.
Yep, and I tell our coaches all the time, just remember that you might be bored, the client probably isn't. And we've gone through this with our, say, even our young athletes basically come twice a week for 10 weeks. I said, that's only 20 exposures to us.
Yeah.
And in that 20 exposures, we generally don't do the same workout 2 days in a row, which means they get exposed to each lift individually only 10 times. So once a week, they do the exercise. I've been training my son and his friends who are 14 now for a couple of years. And we do the same like you were talking about. We trap bar deadlift, we goblet squat, we bench press, we do chin-ups, we do ring rows. We do the same thing. We've been doing the same thing for years.
Yeah.
They are not the least bit bored.
Yeah.
And in fact, when we change things, they usually say, why can't we do, I tried to do snatches instead of clean. Why can't we do cleans? We don't like these. So I think coaches very often, because we're doing it, we look at it and think, I might coach groups 4 times a day, 5 days a week. So I might have 20 exposures a week to the program.
Yeah.
And the person has 2.
Yeah.
So my 20 exposures is going to get me bored of that same program.
Yeah.
But it's not going to get the client bored. And so I think sometimes coaches or trainers are changing things for themselves.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think you'll have the templates or the systems that you'll use, and as a coach, I think I know for myself, you want to experiment, but within reason. I think the main factor is you've still got to think about the needs of the client or the athlete that you're working with, and what their goals are. And like you say, if you're doing rows and cleans, and they're still progressing, why change it to something that, one, may potentially injure them, or two, they're just not going to enjoy and they're not going to stick to the program.
Right. Because, again, for them, a lot of times, I always think, particularly in the early stages, people benefit through repetition.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing over and over again is actually really good for them.
Yeah.
And they don't, as with our higher level athletes, like with our elite guys in the summer when we've got our National Hockey League guys, or American Hockey League guys, we change every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And we try to make the change, again, it's that same variation without change idea, but we try to make the change significant enough so that these guys aren't bored. But that's a very different audience. Your high-level audience is very, very different from everybody else, 90% of the people that you're going to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. Just touching on, when we chatted about the speed and the power type of things, and trying to learn a little bit more and how things have changed. And you mentioned that sometimes we've been going, thinking about what's happening in the weight room is going to, directly correlate to, getting faster. In terms of within the strength and conditioning industry, the fitness industry, there's a lot of and especially with social media, there's a lot more research readily available, information, and sometimes just people's opinions that are put out there on how things should be done, what's not very good, what people think they've been using which have been successful. Do you think this is productive for people to find out what is actually going to be beneficial for them, or do you think it's just turned into a chance for coaches to say, well, I think this is right, and just bash what other coaches are doing?
I would say it's a little bit of both. I think in some ways it's been great. I think the biggest thing, and I say this a lot in my lectures, one of the things we need to be able to do is we need to learn to filter. Yeah. Because the problem now is that we have information overload, and there's a line in the book, Never Eat Alone. Yeah. And it said the problem isn't information overload, it's filter failure. Yeah. And it's a guy named Clay Shirky, who's actually a computer guy. Not a strength and conditioning person, but I think it's extremely applicable to strength and conditioning. Yeah. The problem isn't information overload, it's filter failure. The bigger problem in fitness, we have so many full of shit people in fitness who don't train anyone, but who love to comment and love to present the illusion. And I've been saying this last couple of years, one of these years I'm just going to come out and say the names. Yeah. But I would hope that people can figure out on their own, but they can't.
Yeah.
Because we have people that are, I mean, if I name the names to you, you'd be like, really? But people that are viewed nationally, worldwide, as authorities who are totally full of shit.
Yeah.
They don't train anybody.
Yeah.
But they have an opinion about every training technique and how everybody should be trained, and they know the best way to do everything. And you kind of look and think, but you don't train anybody.
Yeah.
You don't have any clients. You don't have, like, the one thing I always said, Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, we have clients.
Yeah.
We have a lot. We have, our client load during the year is, I won't say in the thousands, but it's in the thousands.
Yeah.
So we've got more than 1,000 clients during the year that we are actively trying things with.
Yeah.
Which means we actually know if something's working or not. Whereas, some guy who's working in a gym or working in his garage or training himself or whatever it is,
yeah,
that's it. They've got an N equals 1 study, and they're trying to tell you that they know the answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I look and think it's really hard for you to say you know the answer based on the one person that you're training or the 2 people that you're training or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Versus we look at it and say, okay, we tried it, like our speed development formula. We calculated out that we ran 30,000 tens last summer.
Wow.
30,000 10-yard dashes.
Wow.
That gives us some data to draw some conclusions from.
Absolutely. And when you mentioned there about working with clients, I think that comes with experience as well. Building up that base and trying things out with different clients, and because I know there's a lot of everyone feels as though there's the research side of things, from the journals, but that's a controlled environment. I think sometimes actually, the own information that you get from the clients that you get, the anecdotal evidence that you get can be beneficial as well. What happens in the real world.
Oh, without question. I would say absolutely, positively, without question that is going to make a really, I put more stock. What I want to know, I always said, I want to know what real coaches are doing.
Yeah.
And I don't really, I shouldn't say I don't care, but I don't care as much what somebody's doing in the lab.
Yeah.
Because as you said, that's a controlled environment, or it might be something that's trying to look at one really highly specific variable. That's not what I'm looking at. I want to look at, more than anything, I want to know, okay, this really good coach is doing this with this group and is having success.
Yeah.
That means a lot to me.
Yeah.
Versus this person did this with this group, in a laboratory setting. Because again, sometimes the groups are just not. You have to look at who's your subject.
Yeah.
If they're studying, a physical education class at a university, that has nothing to do with what's going to happen with a group of professional athletes.
Absolutely. What?
They don't have any similarities. So I think that's when you look at research. We were just talking about this today when I did this lecture this morning. Is that you need to read research carefully.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the people over-conclude.
Yeah.
And sometimes to the point where their conclusion isn't really even supported by the data.
Yeah. Yeah. What I did a podcast with Jim Wendler, and what summed it up, he summed it up quite well, is that sometimes the research is just catching up to what real world coaches are already doing, but it's just the data's there, and it's written down, it's in an official format, but I think sometimes not being able to understand what the research actually is and coming to a different conclusion, like you said, can sometimes be a little bit of a hindrance to coaches.
Well, actually, it's funny. My friend Alan Cosgrove says research is sports history.
Yeah.
They study what we already did.
Yeah.
And Jim Wendler is right. Wendler's got the same point. I mean, what they do is they look and think, okay, this is what somebody's doing, and they're having really good results. Let's do a study and try to figure out why.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And you're seeing a lot of that even now. Like, there's a lot of people ask me, like, what should I study? And I'm like, study bilateral versus unilateral training, because people are still fighting us on unilateral training because, there's no research to support it. Well, there's no research to support it because no one's done it. But we're pretty clear on the fact that we think it's effective.
Yeah.
But automatically feel I got into not an argument, but I had a disagreement that turned into a podcast. And one of the things that the person I was discussing with kept saying was that, well, there's all these studies that show that squats do this and squats do this. And I said, no, the studies don't show that at all.
Yeah.
I said, the studies show that leg strength, as developed by squats, does that.
Yeah.
I said, and when you've already predetermined what the training method is going to be, you can't attribute the results to the training method.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they might have done the same study, and if the person had done leg press, the result might have been the same.
Yeah.
Because their legs got stronger. So it wasn't squats that did it. It's just that we've always used squats as the vehicle to study whatever it is, vertical jump, power, speed, whatever we were studying at that time. But then people are saying, see, squats did it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know if squats did it or if training did it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, and sometimes the real world coaching side of things, and it's it's like what we chatted about in the programming side of things. If you're still getting progress, if you're still getting people results, why not stick with what you're doing on that? You mentioned there about being able to filter information, and because everybody tries to be maybe a jack of all trades for different areas. What has been your process of refining the information getting through, and is there any recommendations on what you would suggest?
I do. I think I'm a huge Twitter person.
Yeah.
And I think developing a good Twitter follow list is really important. And figuring out, okay, this is somebody that I think is smart and does a really good job and is genuinely doing what they say they're doing, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then start following and start seeing who they follow, and so start looking at all this process and saying, okay, I'm going to gradually build this out.
Yeah.
Where I'm getting a consistent amount of kind of pre-filtered information.
Yeah.
So like for me, Brandon Marcello, really smart guy, good quality information. I know I should follow Brandon. And, if Brandon says, hey, read this article, okay, I'm going to read that article.
Yeah.
And, and I don't tend to follow the same standard fitness type people that everybody follows because, again, those are the ones I think, if they don't have a facility or a group or, a large client list or whatever it is, I don't tend to follow those people.
Yeah.
I don't tend to follow the, hey, this is what I do or this is what I read type people. I tend to follow more people who are actually working in the field.
Yeah.
On a day-to-day basis that I know and that whose honesty I trust.
Yeah.
To make sure that we're getting the right kind of information out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes there can be some coaches that, especially when you look on social media, might have a big following or who sometimes shout the loudest. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best coach or the most qualified coach.
And if they're constantly saying they're the best, they probably aren't.
Yeah, yeah.
So you should shy away from them.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is and this is maybe small or petty of me, I don't follow people who don't have shirts on in their pictures.
Okay.
That's the big one for me. And I always tell people, it's like, if you don't have your shirt on, I'm probably not listening to you. Because, if that's the way you're selling your services or trying to profess your knowledge, then we've got a problem.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Just on a side note from that, it's funny how many sort of images you'll see of a coach stood there with no shirt on, and the caption is actually about nothing to do with anything that's in the photo. It's nothing. It's nothing important or anything worth reading. It's just a chance for them to be clicked on.
Yep, and same thing with, I also try to not, I don't tend to follow or listen to people who post pictures of themselves lifting or people who talk about how much they can lift. I find all that stuff to be inconsequential.
Yeah.
I look at it, if you're spending your time on Twitter telling me how strong you are or how much you can lift, then I think you maybe have a lot less to offer than I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's...
Adults should not be conversing about how much they can lift. You know what I mean? Like, I look at that and think, there was a time when I was a kid when I was strong.
Yeah.
And I don't mention that ever, in like any of my social media stuff, like, oh, I used to bench this, or, in 1981, I squatted this. You know what I mean? I'm like, seriously? I look at that stuff and think it's absurd.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got to be beneficial to the potential client that, you may be working with. We've chatted about quite a lot of topics there. Just from everything that we've chatted about, is there any take-home points or words of wisdom that you have for everyone listening?
And I apologize if it sounds different. I just had to stop. I'm getting gas, believe it or not. But I think there's a couple of take-home points. As I said, one is that, I think the point about filtering is really, really important. I think people need to be able to, they need to become a good and effective filter. Yeah. I also think that you need to develop that list of people that you're going to listen to and realize, okay, why, who am I listening to and why? Is this person somebody that is worth my energy?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Are they worth me investing my time in? And I think they need to also be able to look at those people and think, why, am I listening to this person because this person told me that they were good at something? Or am I listening to this person, I always think because someone else told me they were good at something. And I think those are two things that are very, very different. Yeah. Yet in a lot of ways end up being, unfortunately, way too similar. Like this, when you keep getting this, if somebody, like I said, is always shouting about how great they are, then I'm thinking they're really trying to create a reputation for themselves that they're great at something. And that's why every day on social media they talk about, or if that's, every video is, watch me bench press 300 pounds, or, look at me, look how ripped I am with my shirt off, or, whatever that may be. I feel like all those things are red flags for me that maybe these are people you shouldn't be following. Yeah. If people are deliberately controversial, if they're angry, if they're rude. There's some guys now that are pretty influential on social media, and their language is really bad, and they're always negative. Everybody else, it's kind of the everybody sucks but me, and I shouldn't be using the same bad language that I criticize them for, but I do. I try to not do that though in my social media posts. I try to not write things that I wouldn't want my kids to read. Yeah. And if somebody's one of those guys, and again, you could probably figure out exactly who the names are, but they're always, they're F-bombing everything, and they're talking about how everybody else is an idiot and they're the only one that knows anything. If you get those people, you should probably automatically assume, all right, this is not somebody that I want to emulate. Yeah. And so I think so much of it, and you're probably sitting there yourself saying it's all common sense, right? Absolutely. And it's all common sense. That's the reality of it. It's all common sense. Yeah. You have to look at people and think, are these people that have similar value systems to me? Are they people that think similarly to me? Yeah. From a big picture standpoint, maybe obviously they don't have the same from a training standpoint. Yeah. Those are the kind of people you probably want to be following. Yeah, absolutely. It's I must admit there's some times where you're scrolling through some videos and when it's just all swearing and nothing positive, it's a little bit it can have an effect on you that you don't really want to be reading that. Like I said before, it's got to be beneficial. Like for me, from setting up the podcast and from the post that I put out there, I try and if one person can take one piece of information from it, then that's good enough for me. At least they can take something that's going to be beneficial to them. Obviously, quite a lot. I gotta jump off because even though we said 45 minutes, we've gone nearly an hour, and I have another one scheduled at 1 o'clock that I'm going to have to get to. I was just literally about to say thanks a lot for taking the time. I know we ran over a little bit there. Thanks a lot for taking the time to chat with Mike. Really, really enjoyed, picking your brains and chatting with you. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week. Well, great. Hey, thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and I apologize that I had to jump off, but I'm going to try to run in and go to the bathroom here and then try to get queued up for my next podcast. No worries at all, Mike. Thanks a lot, and enjoy the rest of your day. Okay. Bye. You too. Thank you.